Greetings, Black family, and welcome to On the Wake Up Radio. I am your host, DC Radical One, and you have entered the center. Shout out to our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. You can check us out at SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and now iHeartRadio at On the Wake Up Radio. And now, of course, you can check out this show and very soon more content here at the DC Radical One YouTube page. And just want to thank everybody for sharing and liking and spreading the word about the DC Radical One YouTube page. It's a new page, it's a new outlet. We're trying to get the message out. Some very serious times, a lot of things going on in the world, and we're trying to let our people know about things that are going on. But even within that, also, sometimes you have to take time out to talk about things that are not as serious, but still are as pertinent. And today's topic is, of course, are celebrities and athletes simply well paid slaves? So we will get into that shortly. I see that our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby, is here on time. Greetings to you, wonderful producer. And the wonderful sister Nina is in the building, BB48 and Straight Black Pride to that sister there. She's been a great supporter, both on social media and, I might add, monetarily. And I'm not sure what it is, maybe a book, I'm not sure, but get something free to that sister. As well as I don't see you got ripped off in the building where he is. I guess this would be even earlier, but he has been quite gracious with the donations as well. And so as we let people come into the building, this is going to be a relatively short show because I do have business to attend to, which is why we are starting earlier than normal. So I'll be in here about an hour, 15 minutes, hour and a half at the most, and then be on to get on to other business. Right now, we always have a Dr. Chancellor Williams Day event every year. And as you all know, in different places, there are different regulations going up about meeting sizes and where you can meet and what capacity buildings can have, and even regulations about being outside, which I just find ridiculous, like as far as number of people. And so because all those things are up in the air, we're currently trying to figure out how we're going to go about continuing the tradition. We're going to continue the tradition for those who are in the DMV area. We are definitely, without question, going to have the grave site ceremony at the Dr. Chancellor Williams grave site, and we'll be releasing that information soon. That will be more than likely, that's going to be on Sunday, December 20th at noon. That's pretty much the accepted time. Because the days are so short, the weather is so cold, so you want to get out there high noon, the warmest part of the day, get the ceremony in, and get on with the rest of people's day. In fact, the first time we did it, weirdly enough, we actually got people to come outside to a graveyard at night. The first ceremony was at night, so that was interesting. And if I can find the video of that, I may put that up on this YouTube page because I thought I took video of it. I know Brother Genie took video of it. So we will have Dr. Chancellor Williams Day outdoor ceremony And I am thinking about, we're trying to figure out how to do a lecture and stream it out to the people, since it's going to be a limited number of, if any, people there. I mean, other than like people helping me set up technically. So look forward to that information if you're following me on Instagram at dc.radical, the numeral one, and at Twitter at dc underscore radical underscore one, and of course here on the YouTube page. And we'll get that information out to people, because we do have events that we do annually. We do Dr. Chancellor Williams Day annually. We do Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad Day annually, and we're going to do that. It's just a matter of what form that will take, and of course that will be based upon the rules and regulations that Urugu put in place. So with that business taken care of, I really just want. I was thinking about this as far as celebrities and athletes, and I've actually done an older show on celebrities. But what made me think about it is two things that happened this week. One, and I didn't know. I'm thrown off because everything's weird. NBA, I guess it's the NBA. Well, it's the NBA off season, and they're doing contracts and trades and all these things. And I'm looking at just some of the numbers, and because I don't really follow the NBA close, other than look at like the second round of the playoffs through the finals, I'm seeing people with all kinds of contracts, and this guy signing for 16 million, never heard of the person. 20 million, never heard of the person. 25 million, 30 million. People I have heard of, 35 million a year. And then I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking to myself, how confident does a European have to be to pay multiple black people tens of millions of dollars a year and not worry about them building anything economically for themselves, or compete with those white people that are paying that money? Now think about that for a minute, right? Now, I understand that the people who run the leagues are billionaires. I understand that. But think about the number, let's just say, in the past 20 years for the NBA. How many millionaires have been made in the NBA? Black millionaires, I'll say, have been made in the NBA in the past 20 years. Like, do we don't even think about it. I'll say, let's see, they draft 30, 60, okay, on average, 60 plus people coming to the league every year that are drafted. And I think there's a certain amount of contracts you get that's guaranteed with the NBA. And then out of those, you're probably talking about 85% of the league is black. So let's say you take 50 people that you make millionaires, and then over 20 years, that's 1,000 people. So that's 1,000 black millionaires. Greetings, Sister Simba. Right? That's 1,000 black millionaires this century. We're just using basic math. That's one league. Then you take the NFL, and the NFL has, you bring in more players, more rounds, things like that. I believe the base salary for NFL players, something like 325 million. Like, that's like 325,000. Excuse me. That's like the low end, right? That's like seventh round pick, free agent type of money. I mean, but it's not a lot of regular jobs you can get 325,000 a year. The average NFL career is like 4 years. So if you're a guy and you come in and you make three 325, 350 a year for 4 years. You end up leaving the league making over $1 million. Now, of course, it's taxes and everything like that will take you under $1 million, but you know, it's not bad gig if you can get it, as they say. Right? Now, that's the low end of the spectrum. The high end of the spectrum, you have like a defensive end make $15 million a year, wide receiver $20 million a year, quarterback, and I believe there may be about half a dozen. Well, actually, no, it's less than that because I'm counting people who are mixed. So there were 3 or 4 starting black quarterbacks. Some of them are making money, some of them aren't, but that's another discussion. But if you're a starting quarterback in the NFL now, you're making about, on average, maybe $30 million a year. $30 million a year. Wide receiver, top end wide receiver, $20 million a year. Right? Start good quality starting offensive lineman, $10 million a year. Why am I throwing these numbers up? Again, as I said previously, think about how confident a European or a hat has to be to give their enemy millions of dollars and have absolutely no fear of those people using that money to become economic competition. Have we ever thought about that? Think about the psychology of that. Think about how they must have a system in place where they know before the people come into the league who's a threat and who's not. They have to, right? Now, for anyone who's like known someone that's a serious athlete in high school, if you know somebody that's a serious athlete, and I'm sure things have changed over the years, but I've known people when I was in high school that got recruited, went to big school, played football. I've known people after I was an adult, younger people who got recruited, and literally, right? Literally, one of the tools used to recruit brothers into some of these large colleges and universities. Sisters in the chat, because it looked like it's mostly sisters in the chat. Y'all tell me, what is one of the things that they use to recruit brothers to go to these large universities? I'll give y'all time to think about it. And another thing, and I was talking to a sister. Another thing we don't think about, right? You look at the whole college football landscape. There was a time when in the 60s where up into the 70s where college football was popular. But what is now the most popular and considered universally the best college football conference didn't have black people. Southeastern Conference, SEC, right? Those schools, for those that know that whole southern area from you got South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, down through there, Florida. Those schools didn't have black people. Interestingly enough, and weirdly enough, right? When college football, and our wonderful producer said honeypots, right? But specifically what kind? But you're there, When college football became nationally popular with the rise of television, right? The schools that were segregated, when they started playing nationally, you start getting enough money and get to travel and things like that. Because only like certain teams like Notre Dame used to travel. Like Notre Dame used to travel. Somehow Notre Dame and USC used to play way back in like the 30s when you had to take some type of ridiculous train or whatever, right? But when people start to travel and television and you start getting to see other teams, those teams like in the SEC, they didn't have black players. They were all white teams. When they played, because there was a famous game where USC, University of Southern California, came, I believe they came to Alabama and just smoked them. And the black, black dudes running all past them, running all over, making them look crazy. And then all of a sudden, they decided to get integrated. And then at that time, this, right, let's see, within the next 10 years, television makes college football huge. It's a huge money maker for television, right? And so what you end up having is what I call a neoplantationary system. Now, what do I mean by a neoplantationary system? Well, it's very simple. The athletes produce the money. People go, yeah, people root for their team and the team spirit and all that, and the college and university and so forth, so on. But people want you root for your team when your team is good, right? When people started recruiting black athletes, those were the teams that were good. Thus, the black athletes were the one that increased the popularity of the sport, and then the television come and puts in the money, and then the money goes to the schools, the money goes to the coaches, the money goes to the networks, the advertisers spend money, boosters come in and spend money, all of this money going around. And what does the athlete get in college? He gets a scholarship. If you're a college football athlete, unless they've changed it, it's actually a series of 1 year scholarships. Neoplantationary. You're generating millions of dollars. They're selling your jersey, right? Like all of this came, really kind of came to a head years ago. Like when Reggie Bush won I think they ended up taking his Heisman back. His family took some money or whatever the case was. But then, he started making a point, and people started making a point. Well, what about all those? I think his number was number 2 in college. I can't remember. It's been, it's like 15 years ago. What about all those number 2 jerseys? What about all those fans in the stands? What about all the popcorn and soda and beer being sold? Like massive amounts of money being generated by him and other black athletes at other schools because they're running and jumping and flipping and just, doing this amazing stuff that, where people sit around, I've never seen this before. Except for the last black guy that came and the last black guy, I've never seen this except for Barry Sanders and Gail Sayers and, we know how it is. And that college system, millions of dollars, maybe more than that. And then you go to the college, what they call March Madness. Same thing. Now, those teams are even more predominantly black. You have white schools with all black teams. Georgetown University here in Washington, D.C. was a prime example. They had a black coach who was a local high school coach that recently transitioned. Rest in power to Coach John Thompson. People who weren't from D.C. in the early 80s thought Georgetown was some small black school because they saw the team. They saw a bunch of brothers and a big giant black coach. A school that was prestigious and known for its lawyer program, its political science program, its nursing program, but not any major sports. Was not a major sports program. John Thompson comes in, popularizes it. You start seeing people on the West Coast wearing Georgetown jackets. Coach gets paid. School gets paid. It's already a prestigious school where you have to pay $1 bazillion to get in. But then it becomes a national brand. And then you have the NCAA, where by the early 80s, black students are now used to being recruited and going to these white schools and getting the scholarships and getting the national attention and things like that and making massive amounts of money. And again, $1 billion television contracts, $0 going to the collegiate athletes, right? Neoplantationary system. So now you have a situation, at least with the NBA, where a lot of brothers are like, you know what, I'm not even going to college. I'm just gonna bypass that, or I'm gonna go for 1 year, or I'm gonna go for two, or I'm gonna go play in Europe and then come back and then go into the NBA. Greetings to Sister Fonessa. I don't think I spoke to you, and see she mentioned Cam. I guess she's talking about Cam Newton. Um, yeah, Cam Newton's only he's getting paid very little money playing with the Patriots. I can't remember the number, but some astonishingly low. That's a whole nother discussion. We'll get to that. But again, a neo-plantationary system for the college athlete, and then you come into the pros, and as I said before, there's definitely some type of system where you filter out the people that may be a problem. And I'm sure it's something we normally wouldn't hear. You end up hearing and getting to see it live with a person who I don't even think is genuine, and that's what makes it so interesting. But he was easy to make. It's so deep how they did it. Because if you make a target of him, then you can make other people back up. And I'm talking about, of course, who? Colin Kaepernick. Now, I am not a believer in the how can I put it? I'm not necessarily a believer in the sincerity of Colin Kaepernick in the sense of him being some type of revolutionary figure or someone that's positive for black people, because he's not. Number one, Colin Kaepernick is at best racially ambiguous. Number two, Colin Kaepernick comes in the line of that entire Black Lives Matter situation. And we discussed that multiple times on this show and who's behind that and everything like that. But what's so deep and interesting about it is because of what they did publicly on the outside, which is ostracize Colin Kaepernick, keeping him out the league, things like that, it keeps the other Negroes in line. Because he didn't remember, this is an NFL quarterback. NFL quarterbacks, number one, don't grow on trees. If an NFL quarterback can play, and this is a person that took his team to the Super Bowl at one time, if he can get basically blackballed out the league, your average NFL safety, linebacker, that guy's not throwing away his $6 or $8 million he might be making to back him up. Eric Reed, NFL safety, I believe he played one time with San Francisco. He's been around the league now. He did, and he's been like semi blackballed. But I think him and Colin Kaepernick played together. But he's had a very hard time continuing his career. And if you watch sports, when you see that there are certain people that aren't playing, and you see the level of play at their position, it's obvious what's going on. BB for Hodier to Brother Kevin. It becomes obvious what's going on because you see the level of play at a person's position. When you look at it, you're like, this person is better than the guy that's starting on these four teams at least. But because of their political stances, you see them just not get an opportunity. Which is, of course, is always interesting because you see people like Ben Roethlisberger, who has been accused of rape multiple times. And this guy's been in the league 15 years or so. Still in the league. We haven't heard anything about him raping anybody lately. I guess he finally had enough of that. But that's one of those things that was kind of just covered up. You never hear about it. You always hear about Mike. Now Michael Vick's been retired. You hear about Michael Vick and those dogs, but you never hear about Ben Roethlisberger raping women. Anytime a black athlete does something, you hear about it, but European athlete, you don't hear it. Even in my favorite sport is boxing. There's a guy, Sergey Kovalev, who was accused of beating a woman and kicking her dog. And he's pretty much at the end of his career, and he got a big payday to fight a very popular Mexican fighter. Meanwhile, while he's beating women and biting them and kicking dogs and all types of stuff, anytime a black fighter gets accused of anything, it's all over. It's a big deal. And our wonderful producers like the dogs are more important than the women. And see, yeah, he kicked the dog, and they didn't even ostracize him. You know how they are about their dog, so that's really a cover up. But all of these things really make you think: are celebrities and athletes simply well-paid slaves? How is it first of all, if they were free thinking people, and we've seen the social justice thing raise up in the wake of George Floyd, and you see the athletes talking, and what's interesting is not that the athletes are talking and trying to be more active, things like that. That's good. What's interesting is what was the all of this angst and some of this anger and these various emotions that people were going through. Because it's obvious that some of the brothers who are athletes, were really what they had been holding in was leaking out of some of these brothers, right? Some of the things that they had tried to avoid admitting was still real was coming out. And my only disappointment with some of these brothers expressing themselves was I saw too much crying. I saw too much crying. I didn't see enough anger. Now, understand, world class athletes have far more testosterone than the average male. Right? These people physically train every day. People are taking supplements where they can, which is increasing their testosterone and thus increasing, their aggression. Right? In order to stand in front of another man and get punched in the face and punch him back, you have to have a certain level of testosterone and aggression. In order to run down a football field as fast as you can on special teams and try to knock someone's head clean off their shoulders, there's a certain amount of aggression there. In order to be, let's say, a 6'4" guard and to go in the lane with 6'10" defenders and jump up and try to take the ball and cram it down their throat, there's a certain amount of aggression there. But when it comes time to address racism, we get crying. Are those the acts of a man who is mentally free, or a man and group of men who are well-paid slaves? Where is the aggression when it's time to deal with the enemy? Where is the aggression to economically compete with other communities? I was talking to somebody and I was thinking, okay, just as a thought, if you got 10, because I think, sometimes if you get more than 10 black people to try to do something, it starts, going haywire. But if you got 10 brothers, right, athletes, NFL, NBA, maybe you can find one brother playing MLB. where they make a lot of money and their money is guaranteed. Why hasn't anyone said, hey, you know what? Let's start a capital investment firm and let's seek out certain black businesses that we already see are popping, and let's invest in those businesses and let's help them expand. Right? Now think about it. If you're making $20 million a year and you say, all right, let's everybody put in 100,000. Now we know good and well that some of these brothers, their yearly strip club budget probably exceeds 100,000. If their yearly strip club budget doesn't exceed 100,000, if you start adding up their multiple baby mamas that they're not married to, that budget, without question, way exceeds 100,000 if we're talking about somebody that's making 10 mil a year or more. What stops 10 brothers from starting $1 million firm with 100,000 a piece when you're making 10 million or more? Now I understand, of course, you're gonna say, hey DC, but they don't make the whole 10 mil because the taxes over. So I understand that, but what I'm saying is a $15 million a year athlete, unless he does not have a very good accountant and financial advisor, is bringing home at least 10, and depending on what state you're in, maybe 12 of that 15. Right? So yeah, we want you to make your investments. We want you to secure your home so you have a place to live, and your mama, and we know how brothers do. We want you to go ahead and get your one Ferrari, right? And 2 regular cars, or 1 Bentley, or whatever, whatever. Well, we're fine with all that. We're not asking. I'm not asking, why don't these people come to the hood and throw money in the air? No, I'm not asking that. I'm saying, what's stopping a group of black men who are financially well off and in their prime, some of whom have attended colleges and universities, and thus I'm sure had to make some connection with someone somewhere that knows something? What's stopping them from making this type of economic move on the chessboard? Because this is something that would be beneficial to them as well as the people who have the businesses. Right? But we don't think that way. But these are the thoughts of free people. Now, okay, here's the question. All right, why don't they think? DC, okay, you say they don't think that way. Why don't they think that way? Well, let's take a look at it. Who are the owners of various sports leagues? Right? And I'll just leave that out there. Who is the commissioner of the NBA? And I know I got a lot of sisters in here, but I do got some brothers in here, and I know one of y'all brothers know before I actually have to look it up, because I can visualize him, but I can't remember his name. And so just think about that. Who are the majority of the agents, sports agents? Who are the majority of sports lawyers? Who are the majority of accountants? Who, and I'm really going to give it away now, who are the people that make the jewelry that brothers buy? Right? So the NBA commissioner, Adam Silver. And the brother says Adam Silver, and he's a hat. Exactly. And who was the commissioner before him? David Stern. And if we have any question about whether or not David Stern's a hat. David Stern was born where? New York City, right? We're starting to get the picture now. The reason these brothers don't think about economically challenging these people is because they're surrounded by people who have made it their business to exploit black people economically since before this country was founded. The hats. And our wonderful producer says, we buy the jewelry that they make with the gold and diamonds, rubies, emeralds, etc., that they steal out of Africa. Just think about that. Like, if you've been in New York and you've been to, I believe they call it the Diamond District, you already know. I remember I walked through there one time. I saw one brother from the continent and untold numbers of hats. There are no diamond mines in Israel that I know of. So how is it that the hats own the Diamond District? And we're the number one between the athletes and especially the rappers. We buy more jewelry than anyone. I remember, I guess it was the early 2000s. I remember when the rappers were talking about who they got their stuff from and bigging up the guy. And the guy's name was, of course, what? Jacob the Jeweler. So you have, now check it out. So you have the record company executive, because we talked about that last week, who pays the rapper. So the record company executive of the hat, he pays the rapper. The rapper goes out and buys jewelry, so he pays the hat. He has a lawyer, he pays him. He's a hat. The guy who sets up the shows, he has to pay him. He's a hat. More than likely, when he goes and gets real estate, you try to buy a house, the record company executive will recommend somebody who he's a hat. Hey, you need an accountant. You need to count what's going on. I know somebody. Sends them to him, and he's a hat. And then we wonder, how in the world do our how do our athletes end up bankrupt? How do our athletes lose 50, $75 million? I believe who was it? Was it Antoine Walker? I believe it was Antoine Walker, NBA player back in the day. I think I saw a story, and if I don't have the numbers correct, forgive me because it's been a long time. I think he said he made something like $100 million in his career, and he's broke. And I'm sure he doesn't have any idea where the money went. But I have an idea because I know after thinking about it and looking at it and seeing it, I said, they give them the money because they know they're going to take it right back. And if they don't take it back with how I just said it, with your agent and your accountant and your business manager and so forth and so on, and the jeweler and the car dealer and the realtor, who you don't know are all working on the same team, then, yeah, Antoine Walker, right, brother. If they're not doing it like that, how are they doing it? Everybody, this week was talking about the Jeezy and Gucci Man versus. And I admit I'm not a fan of either one because I had pretty much kind of stopped listening to. I never got into the trap music thing. We talked about hip hop last week, so I won't go into details. right? But everyone was praising Jeezy and saying he, he's grown up, he's been mature, blah blah blah, whatever. He changed, whatever. And all I'm thinking is, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking to myself, peace to brother Teku. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, all that's great. And he said he had real estate and he doing this and that, whatever. Hey, that's fantastic. But when he dies, who is that money going to? And our wonderful producer says that they do the Daffy Duck counting. One for you, one for me. Two for you, one, two for me. Three for you, one, two, three for me. Yeah, that's how they do it. And then we're wondering what happened. But he's married to, now this is a guy that's supposed to be from the street, and I assume he's former drug dealer or whatever. I really, really pay attention to the guy. I'm not gonna lie to you. For a reformed hood guy and talk about trapper die and this and this and that, and he's married to some Asian woman, and when he dies, it goes right to the Asian community. And I remember, I don't know if many people remember, I believe his name was Reginald Lewis. He was a businessman and very successful businessman, food company, and he married an Asian woman, and he died like suddenly, like early 50s. He was making, I mean, he was worth, I believe he may have been in the $100 million range, if I'm not mistaken. And this is at a time where um, this was in the, he may have got started in the 80s. Yeah, Reginald F Lewis said the first African American to build a $1 billion company, TLC Beatrice International Holdings, died at the age of 51. Wrote the book Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? Right? Married Asian woman. She has all the money. And there you go. Greetings to the brother Lord Bell. So we've seen this play before. We know how it works. Now, what did it say? Reginald F. Lewis built a $1 billion company in the 80s. Black man. And gave his money away to the Asian community. Died at 51. They still young. From a corporate business setting, that's a young man. Greetings to Miss African Roots. Good to see you back. So we've seen this. We've seen this play before. We know what's going to happen to Jeezy's money when he mysteriously falls over and has a heart attack at 55. It's gonna go to whatever her name, Jenny Mai or whatever. It's gonna go to her family. And like we were talking about earlier with how they recruit, as our wonderful producer said, they recruit the brothers in the college with the women. Specifically, from what I have heard from brothers who were athletes, although they were like low level, like NFL practice squad type. They recruit with white women, and they've been doing that for over 20 years. And that begins, and some people were telling me, depending on where you live, this actually starts in high school. And that begins, and Lord Vale says he built school. His wife, Reginald Lewis' wife, built schools in Asia with his money. Well, there it is. There it is. But they use their women to recruit, and then that begins the fascination of the athletes with European women. And we looking at him trying to figure out what's wrong with him. I remember I was talking to a brother. This has been years ago, and he told me he went out with. And I'm going to avoid certain parts to impugn the guilty, but local sports team. So when I say local, well, I say regional sports team. So you all know where I'm from, so you can kind of take a guess. So he went out with them. He was a rookie, kind of like end of the bench, and he went out with some people that when he said the names, I knew them. He's like, oh yeah, man, I went out with them, and we went to the club. He said, bruh, he said they weren't checking for any black women at all. He said the club was mixed. It was a bunch of different people there. He said, but they weren't looking at any sisters at all. And we were looking at him thinking, as regular brothers, and this is, like I said, this has been about 15 years ago, I guess. We're sitting there listening to this as regular brothers, thinking to ourselves, if I were an athlete, millionaire, because the people we talking about, they were starters, right? So these were millionaires. Well, if I said names, you would know. If you know sports, you would know who I'm talking about. And he was like, yeah, they weren't checking for no sisters at all, in no way, shape, or form. And these were all black athletes. And when he said it, I'm not gonna lie, I was shocked. I was like, "Are you serious?" He's like, "Yeah." Now again, this has been probably 15 years ago, and it's so funny because I have gone other places with the brother that told me the story. Uh, group of people I knew, group of people he knew. I knew him through one of my tight partners back in the day, and it was funny because at the time I wasn't used to, how can I put it, wasn't used to being somebody's wingman. Like I wasn't used to going out with somebody and all the attention goes to like one dude. So it was funny, right? And we went out, I'm talking about, DC, fine DC sisters, and most of them were checking him out, and I was laughing to myself. I was like, okay, this is funny. But he said when he went out with them, they're going somewhere, and yeah, the sisters are checking him out because some of them know who they obviously knew who they were, but they weren't looking at no sisters. And of course, now that mentality is much more pervasive in the black athlete's mind. And don't even get me started on the rappers. The young rappers. The thing is, this, the new young rappers is so interesting because first of all, they're so effeminate. They're kind of interesting that they like women at all, and then the fascination with the what I would call hybrid women, and of course this started with Kanye West. Kanye West was the one that was talking about mutts and how popular mutts are with mixed women, but that was his term. Now, it's not my term. I don't want y'all to say I said it. No, I'm quoting Kanye West, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I remember, it's so funny. I remember working with it was a job I was at, and there was, I thought, this light skinned sister there, and we and when I was working, and somehow we got into a conversation and this and that, and I started asking where she's from and all this stuff, right? And Brother Lord Bell says rappers look at other races of women as exotic, exactly. And she said, she's like, yeah, I'm from New Orleans, and she said, I'm a mutt, and Kanye say we in style or in fashion, something like that. And I started laughing, but then I thought about it. I was like, yo, that's crazy. Because when I was growing up, if somebody was if they were half black, they were I guess the word they use now is biracial. It's not the word we use, but not we say biracial. Um, and if they were biracial and grew up in a black community, we just accepted them as black. But she was proud of this new identity of being a mutt because it was in because a rapper had made it popular, and now that's that's the thing. And it's so crazy because it's to the point where, and I don't know this woman's name, but I've seen she's on some type of TV show. She's a white woman. I know she's a white woman because I remember seeing her before. She like specializes in trying to look like some type of mixed woman. She's white, but like goes out, she gets the tanner. She had, I think one time I saw her with braids in her hair. Um, she dresses like a sister. She tries to talk like a black woman, and it's so bizarre to look at it. And she is not one. I'm starting to see a lot of this with white women that are connected to sports that are on TV. So while the athletes have been trained to look for white women, because the white women have been around black men so long, they're training themselves to try to look like some type of mixed black woman. I mean, it is all of it's insane. All of it's insane. And Lord Bell says they like, oh man, we're not gonna repeat that. Lord Bell says the rapper is like dudes, which we know. I've talked about that. I guess I talked about that on a different forum. I haven't talked about that here. I don't even feel like going into it. We all know it now. I mean, we have, maybe one day we'll talk about the rituals with the rappers and what they have to do to get contracts and what people have said they've done to get contracts. But we're not gonna go into that today because I don't have a lot of time. But all of that shows that these mostly brothers are groomed to be well paid slaves. I mean, and again, you have to have supreme confidence as a European to pay people the kind of money that they pay them and not expect them to be any type of a threat. Right now, think about this George Floyd thing and all like I talked about outrage and things like that, and think about they actually this is so deep because you have to know you have them trapped. They literally said, "Okay, what do you guys think we should do?" There were owners who went to players and said, "What do you think?" So a billionaire is asking millionaires, "What do you think we should do to for racial justice?" Right? Right. Now, think about this for a minute. You have to know that you've limited the minds of the people you're asking because there's certain things that you know you're not going to do. And you feel there's no threat of them asking you to do those things. So you already know. You already know what's off the table. And then you ask them and they come up with the same answers. Because why? Why? Because these people aren't paid to think. These people aren't in circles where certain information will get to them. Now, certain information gets to them how? What? Via social media. Certain information does get to them via social media, but not to the point where it's going to affect the masses of brothers in that realm, right? For example, LeBron James said that he was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. And when I saw it, I was like, well, that's interesting. Because the autobiography of Malcolm X was a book that sent me on my way. That's why I'm here talking about what I'm talking about. That's why I'm in Straight Black Pride. That's why I was in the nation. That's why I've been doing race work for the vast majority of my life. That book and Public Enemy and Rakim, some other things. All right. So when I saw it, I was like, "Whoa, LeBron is reading Malcolm X. Interesting." And I think I tweeted, I was like, "Can somebody get him a copy of Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization?" Says he wants to go there. You know, you don't. You ain't got to respond. Just give him the book. Let him read it. You know. But back to my point, the owners have to know that they have contained the minds of these people, and because it, like, we don't really think of it, but their job, even though they have free time, their job is kind of an all consuming thing, right? Because they're no in the NBA they're guarantees, but NFL like there's like no guarantees. It's like week to week thing unless you're at the top end. So to maintain your job, you don't just have to physically train and to practice and to eat right and to study the playbook and to, I mean, all of these things just to get ready to play on Sunday. In the NBA, you playing, I guess in a normal year, they play 3-4 times a week. You're traveling, and you're doing all these things, and you live an isolated lifestyle because who do NBA people hang out with? They hang out with other NBA people, or the boys from college that didn't make it to NBA, or if you're like LeBron, your crew from high school, who I believe one of his partners is actually now an agent, not that kind of agent. I mean like NBA agent, gets people contracts, things like that. And I believe he had, if I'm not mistaken, he has a firm. Somebody help me out with LeBron's. I believe his name is Rich Porter. I think that's LeBron's. Some of his people's from back in high school. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you live that isolated lifestyle. You don't get a lot of outside information about what's going on. And when you get the information, largely it's through the view of major media. Again, I'm not going to run into, let's see, who. I'm not going to run, chances are, I'm not going to run into Bradley Beal from the Wizards, right? And strike up a conversation about racism, white supremacy. You see what I'm saying? I'm not gonna bump into him and see him and be like, "Hey, you Bradley Beal." Be like, "Yeah, man, you know me." You're like, "Yeah, can I get an autograph?" And be like, "Hey, have you ever read Chancellor Williams? Here, read this." It's not gonna happen, right? It's just not gonna happen. Now, there's always a chance of some athlete coming across my social media and seeing something and being like, "Hey, that's interesting." Because that when I had my old Twitter account and more followers, that actually happened before with not an athlete but entertainer actually either retweeted or responded or retweeted and responded to something, and I was like, oh wow, okay, that's interesting. But those things are few and far between. And brother Kevin said the players are inside a bubble within a bubble, right? And then when they go home, they're going home to multi-million-dollar homes, and we don't live in those neighborhoods, right? Even if they are in some upscale black enclave, those people aren't of the mindset to kind of tell them they're disassociated from the masses of black people. And our wonderful producer says they're trying to make it the new normal to disassociate from their gender and their race. Yeah, they're trying to make that the new normal for everyone. That we're all the same and love is love and all that. And of course, we know that's a European because if we're all the same and love is love, and then you can't identify the European as the enemy. And of course, there's a specific European that everybody could, if they were awake, identify as the enemy that they don't want to be identified by. And they are the people who are most in charge of the things we're talking about with the media, the celebrities, and the athletes. I mean, we already understand things like MGM. We just read the names of what the M and the G and the M stand for, and you know who started that, right? Look at the names of the people who own Disney Company, and you know who started that, or who's in charge of it now, and so forth and so on throughout the whole sphere of media. And without the media, the athletics doesn't make the money that it makes. So the whole system is controlled. So the only difference between these gentlemen and ladies and us is they're paid more, which means they have more to lose, which means they're even more enslaved. Because many of us, we don't want to lose our $60,000 a year job or our $80,000 a year job or certainly not our $120,000 a year job. And of course, if you live in New York, that 120, that's small, but you get the point. But if you're in Cleveland, that's good money. So how much more does a person who makes $8 million a year or 10 or 15, how much more does he not want to lose his job or lose endorsements? Because there's no other job there's no replacement for that $10 million a year job. Like even a sport, even a solo sport like boxing, you can be frozen out. Don't make a fight with that guy. Yeah, you can make money fighting, but you'll be fighting lower level competition for less money and watching other people fight for 2, 3, 4 times the money you're making. Because they don't like what you say. They don't like what you represent. So the question is, are celebrities and athletes well paid slaves? Because we are all, as Neely Fuller would say, we're all victims of the system of racism and white supremacy. Neely Fuller and the late great Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. None of us want to be in the position or want black people to be in the position that we're in. Most black people would just simply want to be free, but they don't know what it is. Or at least be left alone to be at peace. Most black people don't understand the nature of the European. They haven't studied history. Most black people have no idea who the small hats are, therefore, they can't identify them. There's no difference between most black people and athletes and celebrities, except they have even less of a chance to get educated because who knew at 18 what they know now, even if you're only 25 now? It's a huge difference between that. And you're talking about people who are coming out of, from what I saw a few minutes of the NBA draft. I don't think there was a guy over 21 in the draft. If so, I missed it. Who knows at 21 what they know at 30? Who knows at 19 what they know at 25? You're getting people 19 years old, giving them, I don't know what the base salary is at NBA now, but I'm sure it's probably $3 million and up for a first round pick, and that's probably extremely low end. Probably more than that, really. Giving a 20-year-old guy $3 million. You know good and well that money's coming back to you. You're not worried about that guy. He's 20 years old. He's doing what any of us would do at 20 years old with $3 million a year. Number one, you think because someone paid you $3 million a year and you're 20 years old that you're going to be able to make three or more millions of dollars a year for, you think, really the rest of your life. I'm young, I'm athletic, healthy, I'm good. They're paying me this type of money. And if you take care of yourself and you're good enough and you're fortunate enough, yeah, you can play 15 years. You can make, at this point, the numbers I saw people throwing around, like I said, $30 million a year and up. $15 million a year for people I've never heard of in my life could literally walk past me right now, and I'd be like, yeah, that dude is tall. That's all I would say. Yeah, if you can make a good, you can make a $250,000 or more in the NBA. Think about that. I'm gonna say it again. Not $250,000. You can make conceivably $250,000,000 in the NBA by the age of 30. And yet, we see, and every year they're making dozens of athletes, dozens of black athletes, some of them going to be, who will be approaching billionaire status, and we see absolutely no capital investment or black business infrastructure coming from this at all. Only of people who are psychologically enslaved can be given that type of money and not be a threat. And our wonderful producer says they're going to smoke it and wear it and drive it into depreciation. $3 million ain't what it used to be. And the sad part is, you're right. And some of them will, I guess the NFL changed their rules recently, but some of them will smoke themselves out the league, eat themselves out the league, or you go to the Sean Kemp route and a lot of other guys. Yeah, you make $10 million, but you have 10 baby mamas, and all of a sudden you don't have as much money as you thought you had. One wife, 8 baby mamas. Yeah, suddenly not as rich as you thought you were. Again, slave behavior. That's breeding farm behavior. We don't want to look at it, but literally a part of enslavement. There was a part of enslavement where they stopped importing Africans and started breeding us. And you just fornicating with women, getting them pregnant, and then they're taking the women to wherever they're taking them. You never see the children again. And we're carrying on that tradition now. Even though we had a period of time post-slavery through Jim Crow up to integration where that was not the norm for our culture. So I'm not even sure how we've gone back to that. And Lord Bell says, don't forget paying for the services of young ladies for their company. Right. Of course. Yeah. And that's how you end up with 8, 9 baby mamas. Or, You don't if you don't pay on the front end, if you get them pregnant, you pay on the back end much more than just paying a professional. Being completely honest, I'm not advocating paying professionals. I'm saying from an economic standpoint, one is actually cheaper than the other. And Devont Guard says it's just a way to control who the youth respects. If you aren't getting the bag, you aren't anyone special. That is a tremendous point. Right. Because these are, I mean, like it says, these are the people that young people look up to. Getting the bag. Now, the funny thing is, when we talk about people getting the bag, we never ask who are they getting it from? Who controls the bag? Is getting the bag more important than controlling the bag? But we don't look at it that way. Now, a wonderful producer says contracts probably forbid them from doing any investments. I can see that. Unless it's the crack smoking uncle who's going to disappear. I wouldn't be, I would, if you've ever read, I don't know how many of you have, if you've ever read never read a athletic contract, but I have read a couple of contracts dealing with music, entertainment contracts. Let me tell you something. Those things are written in order to bamboozle you. They're written completely to the benefit of the label or whatever the case may be. Like that, like you have to pay people to read those contracts and to decipher what's going on and find each little detail and not only translate it to you, but then take it to the other person and discuss it with them and make sure this is what they're saying. And then for them to put out clauses in it for you just in case, they run the flim flam on you so you can get out the contract. Yeah, I've read them. I didn't sign them. I read them. And even as a young person, I was like, something ain't right with this. Nah, I'm good. I'm good. Nope. Sorry. But see, sports contract is different because you have been drafted, so you have to find some way to make some type of deal with this team, or you don't get to play, or you go back, like you miss a year, and then you go back to the draft or whatever. Yeah, who's going to do that? You're 19, they're going to pay you $10 million a year. No one's turning that down. And so now, like our wonderful producer says, whatever the contract says, all of a sudden, that's what you're limited to. Until you get to a point where you're big enough to do other things. But like we said before, these, whether it's the young rappers or the basketball players or even the football players, you're not old enough to have enough life experience and haven't been educated enough to even think about the ideas that I am saying right now. Sister Vanessa says it's crazy how black folks will create industries and then outsource it to non-blacks and turn around and beg for a contract for their own stuff. Well, because if we're doing something artistically, we don't think about it in business terms. That's what happens a lot of times. We don't think about it in business terms, but the people, like we talked about last week with hip hop, the people who are around us are thinking about it in business terms. As a collective, we may have individuals like Russell Simmons who are thinking about it in business terms or was already doing artist management. But as a collective, when we're creating artistically, generally speaking, we're not thinking about it in business terms. That's why people like James Brown and what's the other artist? But these people are like pioneers and people remember them for what they did and what they owned and things like that because they were ahead of their time. Like I think James Brown had his own record printing press back in the day, so he's cutting people out for more money for him. You know that's why Prince went through that whole thing that he went through with Warner Brothers, and that's why he ended up, yeah, the whole changing the name because in essence they legally owned his name from a music standpoint. So he changed his name to release music, releasing music directly to people. However, he was doing that back in the day. So he had to cut them all out. Michael Jackson with all the stuff he had going on. I mean, and the Michael Jackson thing was interesting because I don't know if people remember. Michael Jackson is a perfect example. Okay, this is the most powerful, most popular person at the time in music history. Right? Now, many of y'all remember this. Remember the song, They Don't Really Care About Us, right? Think about it. Michael Jackson, the most famous person in the world at the time. Right? Wonderful producer says Prince and Michael died. It went back to song. Actually, it went to Warner Brothers with Prince, and the timing of his death was real. That's another story. But Michael Jackson made the song. All I want to say is that they don't really care about us, right? Most popular artists in the world, most money, sell out tours, all that. Number one songs, iconic person. Like people, unless you live on like an island somewhere, everyone knows about Michael Jackson. The record labels made Michael Jackson change lyrics to a song. So despite him being the most popular, the biggest artist in the history of the world, and to this day, I believe, what did they change? What did Michael Jackson say? Again, I'm quoting Michael Jackson YouTube. Michael Jackson say, and he said, "Kick me, kite me, don't you black and white me." And then he said something, Jew me, screw me, everybody do me. Something like that. All I want to say is that they don't really care about us. Now, somebody who had knowledge back in the day, I had never heard this term. I didn't know that this kike term, I had never heard it. I didn't know it was a racial slur. Right? When I first heard it, I just took it as he was just saying, hey, these people, they go through the same stuff that we go through. But then I listened to it. I was like, wait a minute, no. Because he wanted to talk about the other part. I said, he's talking about being economically exploited. All I want to say is that they don't really care about it. I said, he's sending this message to us. No wonder they made him change the lyrics. I'm not thinking of Michael Jackson like no race dude, even though, again, who was securing Michael Jackson some of this time? Being secured by the Nation of Islam. He's sitting around talking to these brothers, making songs about they don't care about us. Okay, we don't care about you. Take this mysterious drug. You'll get some sleep permanently. Don't think people don't, artists and athletes don't think about these things. Oh, Tupac, you want to do something and you want to get young people together and stop them from killing each other, and okay, cool. Fine. Get you in a situation that you can't get out of. Because if you read books about Tupac, apparently people tried to kill him way before the situation that ended up ultimately getting him killed. And it's an argument between whether or not his own recklessness got him killed or they finally caught up to him. I'll let you decide. Like, there's so many theories with that. But, yeah, without a doubt, he's a very powerful voice and a person who grew up, like I said before, grew up in the movement, you never know. If you grow up in the movement or you come into it very young, you kind of always revert back sooner or later. And Lord Bell says this is why celebrities can't be our leaders. They are controlled. Indeed, they are. And Sister Farnessa says we want to plan and strategize out loud instead of in secret. We want to be seen. It's interesting you said that because Baba Baruti talked about that um, yesterday, less than 24 hours ago, in fact. And Baba Baruti did his Kebuka presentation that he does annually. He did it via Zoom. And for anyone that's not familiar with Baba Walimu Baruti, I greatly suggest, especially for brothers, get his books. Get his books on Asafo, Iwa, A Warrior's Character, Message to the Warriors. Get those books. See, like we have people who have put the intellectual tools in place for us to be able to have a psychological paradigm shift, but getting it to those people where they could do something of value is why we're having this discussion. And Sister Farnessa says she saw me there. Yeah, I saw you at the end. I saw your name pop up. Yeah, and yeah, that gentleman was there too. The good doctor was there. But I found that interesting. It was a wonderful event. If you're not familiar with Baba Baruti, I believe his YouTube page is still up, and he has a Mama Ya said that he has a earlier presentation from maybe 2014 or something like that up on YouTube. So you can search that and try to check that out. But that's one of the elders that I hold in great esteem. He was very instrumental in giving me how can I put it? He was quite instrumental in giving me a template of morality that wasn't linked into religion. Right? So if you understand what I'm saying, I talked about before, I was once a religious nationalist, if you will. And so between my family and that was like my moral template. And Baba Baruti gave me, when I moved away from that, Baba Baruti gave me a new moral template based on African culture to replace that which I had taken off. So yeah, maybe I'll try to get an interview with Bob. I'll try to get him on the show sometime early next year. And so for those of you who are not familiar with him, you can hear him speak. But it was a very wonderful event last night. It was how can I put it? Helped me revitalize my spirit, if you will. Though not as much as it would have been in person, but we are in the times where we are. So, brothers and sisters, I do have something that I have to do, but I just wanted to talk about that because I saw our people getting back into the celebrity worship with the verses, and of course you got like I said, you got the NBA off season. We have the NFL. Okay, yeah, NFL's going on right now. We have all these things going on, and we're looking to people who Malcolm X told us about, 50, 60 years ago. What did he say? What other people have, I'm paraphrasing, but what other people have celebrities as leaders? Who has trumpet players and saxophone players and comedians as leaders? No serious people have that, but yet here we are, black people. And it's worse now, much worse now than it was then, because he was a voice who was seen in the public, who was seen as a leader and organizer, and people who came behind him were leaders and organizers to the point where the celebrities had to follow them. There were no, you know, the celebrities went and sought out the Panthers when they were doing what they were doing, right? People like Huey were seen as a leader. People like Malcolm were seen as leaders. People like Elijah Muhammad were seen as leaders. And of course, Martin Luther King, but we talked about that. But you know, and sister, oh hold on, brother Devont Guard says, how do we make militancy cool again? All the young entertainers want to be little baby, never want to be grown men. Brother, we got a long road ahead on that. And it's so interesting you said that because I noticed that too. Like as time has gone on, back in the day, where hip hop people wanted to be big. We had Biggie Smalls and a brother who wasn't that tall calling himself Andre the Giant because he was a giant in the mental, and Big L and Big this and Big that. And now here we are, and people want to be little this, little that, the baby. And BB48, man, I don't see him in here. He was like, what's next? You're going to be the zygote because you're already the baby. How much more can we diminish ourselves? And we don't realize the psychological message that it sends out, that we are making ourselves smaller and less important and sending that out to our young people. I'm of the belief, just very quickly, that instead of attempting to save the masses of the people, those people who are in the know have to begin to organize amongst themselves and form groups amongst themselves, and then the collective will come looking for them when the time is right. I don't want to get into any more details than that, but that's just, the basic outline of what I'm trying to say. And Sister Vanessa says that they're talking about vaccinating people within 24 hours of approval of the vaccine, and now people have gone back to talking about things that are not relevant. Yeah, and I'm going to get back into that again because I talked about that on the election show. What their plans were, and here they are. And one of the things I plan to do, I didn't plan to do it until next year, but if I can get it before that, one of the things I plan to do is to do more short, pre-recorded videos and put them up on the channel. So be on the lookout for that within next couple of weeks or so. I have some other things going on. I have to see how that works out, and then I'll take it from there. So it'll become, instead of just a weekly stream, it'll become more like a YouTube channel where content daily, where I may record things, 3-4 things in one day, and then put them up over time. I may do it like that. Also be on the lookout for, I will be releasing or re-uploading older episodes of The Center and other on the wake up shows that I was on. So be on the lookout for that. You'll see that if you have subscribed to the DC Radical One YouTube page, you'll get notifications where it will pop up, and those will be just specifically on the DC Radical One YouTube page. So with that, brothers and sisters, I'm going to bring this to a close. Thank you all for coming out and listening to this short edition of The Center at a different time. I have some place I'm supposed to be in half an hour, which means I have to getting started. Thank you all for your support. Thank you all for spreading the word. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all who have donated. I have a couple of people who have donated to the Cash App. Again, the Cash App is $DC Radical, the numeral 1, all one word. YouTube page is capital D, small c, Radical, the numeral 1. And of course, don't forget to support On the Wake Up Radio. Follow me on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, DC.radical, the number one, and on Twitter at DC underscore radical underscore ONE. I will be back with you all. I might be back with you. I'll definitely be back with you all next week. Thinking about doing 2 live streams next week. If you follow me on social media, I'll let you know. With that, I say a BB for Hodie and straight black pride.